Scott just made the point.
Levels seems to be a lot more secure, not just. It's been a little over 2 years since recreational marijuana became legal here in Colorado, and things are getting, well, they're getting a little weird, including what amounted to a noise complaint from Nebraska and Oklahoma, which the Supreme Court refused to even hear on Monday. I'm Steve Green, this is Trifecta, and with me today to help clear the smoke, around Colorado's Amendment 64, Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. Gents, Coloradans, we're usually good neighbors, we really are, but legalized pot hasn't been quite all Cheetos and beanbag chairs for the people around us. Our neighbors in Nebraska and Oklahoma filed suit with the Supreme Court, which has original jurisdiction in disputes between the states, and the complaint said the state of Colorado authorizes, oversees, protects, and profits from a sprawling $100 million per month marijuana growing, processing, and retailing organization that exported thousands of pounds of marijuana to some 36 states in 2014. If this entity were based south of our border, the federal government would prosecute it as a drug cartel. That's a serious charge, but the Supreme Court refused to hear the case, even though, as Justices Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito wrote, it presents a substantial question, and the plaintiff states have alleged significant harms to their sovereign interests. Bill, we have a strange situation here. It might be unprecedented, where certain federal drug laws have been sort of suspended in certain states. Should the Supreme Court have heard this case in order to provide some legal clarity, or are we seeing a small rebirth of federalism, and it should be up to the states themselves to sort all this out, even if it's a little messy, a little unclear?
A bee in a heartbeat. I mean, that's the whole reason I'm such a fan of federalism. I've said this before. I think it probably bears repeating as often as possible. We talk about the United States as if it's one country. And it is, obviously, it's one nation. But really, to get right down to it, it's probably 7 or 8 countries. I mean, the New England Yankees are different than the hippies on the Oregon coast, and they're different from the people in the Deep South, and they're different. The people in the Deep South are different from the Creoles in Louisiana. You know, the Midwest, you've got the whole mix, and people shouldn't have to listen. People should not have to live by other people's standards to the absolute maximum that we can have that general idiom in force. So yeah, if smoking pot's a big part of your life, and there's a state that allows it, you can move to Colorado. I always felt this way about Nevada. I always thought Nevada was just a great safety valve on the nation, and that Nevadans don't pay any income tax. I don't think they pay any sales tax. They just make tons of money off the gambling. If you want to go to Nevada and gamble, that's fine. You also have a right to say, I don't want a casino in back of my high school. So yes, I completely agree with this. And by the way, Steve, $100 million a month, that's some real change for governments that are, talking about cutting benefits to, veterans.
Yeah, it sure is, and those figures were from 2014, and I believe they've gone up since then. Now, there's a time-honored tradition here in the Rocky Mountains, and that's complaining about all the damn tourists. But now we have a new complaint, and that's pot tourists who don't know what the hell they're doing. According to the Chicago Tribune, out-of-state visitors to Colorado emergency rooms for marijuana-related symptoms accounted for 163 per 10,000 visits in 2014, up from 78 per 10,000 in 2012, according to research published by Dr. Howard Kim, a Northwestern Research Fellow and emergency medicine physician. The 109% increase far outpaced the 44% increase among Colorado residents since the state's recreational marijuana sales began. This emergency room increase, it's almost entirely due to edibles like pot brownies and THC-laced candy. Apparently, people eat 1 or 2. They don't wait long enough for the effects to kick in. Then they eat more. And, of course, pretty soon they've had way too much and they end up at the emergency room. Now, the thing is, all these edibles are labeled by Colorado law with recommended dosages, but apparently tourists are too busy or maybe too excited to read the labels. Scott, should it be a case of RTFM, that's read the fancy manual, for pot tourists, or are Colorado taxpayers stuck paying the price for legalizing something we should have left alone?
Well, now that everybody has insurance under Obamacare, I'm sure that the Colorado taxpayers don't have to pay for that. All the taxpayers in the country have to pay for that when they go to the emergency room. So that's a wonderful thing, except for those, 30 million people who don't yet have insurance of any kind. I wonder how these figures compare. Obviously, we're in the early days of an industry, and it's growing rapidly. I wonder how those figures compare, for example, to the number of people who are brought into emergency rooms as a result of an alcohol-related issue, or the number of people who are brought into an emergency room for taking too much of a prescription drug, or improperly using an over-the-counter drug, or ingesting floor cleaner or whatever. So that I'd need to see the comparison of that. I am fascinated by the question you asked, Bill, though, because it would seem to me that the Supreme Court's failing to grant cert to this case that clearly involves interstate commerce is, in my mind, a de facto repeal of 1942's Wickard versus Filburn decision, which inserted the federal government into the whole business of this poor farmer who was just, keeping some of the grain to feed his own chickens that he had grown, and thereby depriving the stream of interstate commerce from the grain that would otherwise have been there. And immediately the federal government said that gave us the ability to go in and penalize this guy. Well, if they're not taking on this case that clearly does involve lots of product flowing into the streams across state boundaries, I'm greatly encouraged by this, although I would like to see the court actually write that out and declare it that no more does the federal government have the right to make rules and regulations regarding the transfer of private business products.
Oh, Scott, right now somewhere Antonin Scalia is looking down on you, and he is smiling, my friend. Folks, the news on Amendment 64 isn't all bad, far from it. Colorado has a reliable new source of revenue. An entirely new restaurant subculture has come into being. That's no kidding. It's helped to create a booming real estate market in Denver, and our ski towns, well, they've never been mellower. And then there's this little gem I found on Monday from Colorado Springs, which, by the way, is one of the most socially conservative cities in America. KOAA-TV reports that Cannabis Club The Pothole led dozens of volunteers in picking up all kinds of litter and illegally dumped items like furniture at Vermeil Park on the west side. Other clubs organized cleanups in other parts of town. In turn, volunteers over the age of 21 got free joints. Even City Councilman Bill Murray joined in the efforts. When News 5 asked if he supported the distribution of free marijuana, he pulled a joint from his pocket and replied, as a matter of fact, yes. My wife has cancer, and this is for her, so that's why I'm here. I'm here to support my community, support the voters, and assist my wife as she needs it. And just so you know, Councilman Murray is no hippie. He's a fiscally conservative and highly decorated former Army intelligence officer who retired after 30 years as a full colonel and who now serves the city he loves. So if supporters of Amendment 64, like myself, if we could admit that the law has created some unexpected hurdles, maybe its opponents could take a moment to reflect that it's also provided a few unexpected benefits. For PJTV, I'm Steve Green.